Well, hey there. Today we are going to be talking about a new bill that has been introduced by the Colorado legislature, and this bill directly affects landlords. So we want to go through it piece by piece. The bill we're talking about is House Bill number 20-1141, the title of which is Concerning Restrictions on the Fees Charged by Landlords. So this bill is going to hugely impact landlords' abilities to charge certain fees and hold tenants to certain accountabilities that normally are called for in a lease. So we're going to go through this piece by piece. Before we get started, I want to mention that I am not a lawyer. I'm also not a politician, thank goodness. I am a property manager and the owner of Integrity Realty and Management. So I'm going to be going at this a little bit as a property manager and how I feel it's going to affect our clients and then all landlords around the state. All right, so let's go ahead and dive right into this bill. And the very first provision is a really big one. I know a lot of landlords live what we call rent check to rent check, and that means that they really depend on getting the rent this month to pay this month's mortgage. All right, well, this bill assumes that all landlords have a very large reserve in place and they're multiple months ahead on their mortgage payments because they now want to give tenants up to 13 days, almost 2 weeks, to pay their rent before you can charge a late fee. So it says that late fees cannot be charged until rent is at least 14 days past due. Now, if that wasn't enough, they go another step further and they say that after you can charge a late fee on the 14th day, you're now capped at a maximum fee of $20, okay, or 3% of the rent amount if that's less than $20. I don't know that that's really ever going to be the case. So in effect, your late fee is going to be capped at a maximum of $20. Now, I know my interpretation of this is that this bill says, hey, tenant, pay your rent whenever you want. And then if you don't pay it by the 14th day, it's okay. It's only going to be a $20 fee anyways. All right, now, let's say they did pay late. You charge a $20 fee and they eventually paid their rent. The next month comes, they're late again. You got another $20 fee on there, and they're not paying the late fees. Well, previous to this bill, you could potentially file eviction because that's a non-compliance with your lease agreement. All right, now with this bill, it says that you cannot evict a tenant for late fees. So they could, in theory, pay rent late every single month. You could charge a late fee every single month. They could say, forget it, I'm not paying those late fees, and you really can't do anything about it. All right, the fourth provision has to do with rent that's paid through a subsidy of some kind. A lot of areas in Colorado, especially like Denver County, source of income is a protected class. So this means that if a tenant has a Section 8 voucher or any other kind of housing program voucher, if that program is late providing you with the rent voucher, you cannot charge any late fee to the tenant as a result. The next provision says that you cannot charge more than one late fee per past due rent charge. So what they're trying to address here are some leases call for a daily late fee. So once the rent goes past due, the landlord has the ability to charge a particular late fee every day that it continues to be past due. And the mentality here is that it's creating a disincentive to continue to let the rent stay past due because the tenant's going to incur more late fees the longer it goes. Well, under this proposed bill, it says that you no longer can do that. You can only charge one single late fee, and that's going to be capped at that $20 that we previously mentioned. The next provision says that you cannot charge any interest on unpaid late fees. Now, I haven't seen a lot of lease agreements that call for this, but if you have a lease that says that you can charge interest on those unpaid bills or late fees, you no longer can do that under this proposed new law. The seventh provision of the bill says that you cannot recoup late fees from future rent payments. So what a lot of leases call for is that if there's any past due bills on the tenant's account, such as late fees, and the tenant did not pay those, well, when next month comes along and the tenant pays their rent payment, you can take a portion of that rent to pay off those oldest bills first, and then whatever's left over would then be applied to the current month's rent payment. Under this new proposed bill, they said you no longer can do that. Instead, you now have to apply the rent that they're paying you for that current month's rent, and you have to leave the past due bills unpaid. The eighth provision of this bill says that you cannot claim against the security deposit any past due late fees that are more than 180 days past due. So in other words, it's saying that in the scenario if you have a tenant that's late every single month since the time you rent to them, let's say it's a 12-month lease, in all 12 months they were late paying rent, in all 12 months you charged that ridiculously low $20 late fee. Now the tenant's moved out and you're claiming the security deposit and you try to recoup those late fees from the deposit. Under this bill it says that you can only charge a maximum of 180 days worth of those late fees. So anything older than that, you just have to write off. So if it wasn't enough to give the tenants 14 days to pay rent, and if it wasn't enough to cap it at only $20, and then to tell you that you can't charge any daily late fee or interest on late fees, they now are saying that you can't even recoup these late fees if they're over 6 months old. If this is your first time hearing about this bill and learning about these provisions, if you're anything like me, you're probably shaking your head in complete disbelief and thinking it can't possibly get any worse than this. But unfortunately, I now have to talk about the 9th provision, and this is really the worst one. And it says that as a landlord, you cannot charge the tenant for any kind of fees other than rent. So what are we talking about here? If you have to post a non-compliance to the tenant, you can't charge a posting fee. If you have a tenant bounce their rent check and you get charged a bounce check fee from your bank, you can't pass that on to your tenant. If the tenant decides to break the lease and just move out early for regardless reasons, you can't charge the tenant a reletting fee of any kind to cover your costs to re-rent the property. If the tenant has a pet and you are currently charging pet fees, those no longer are going to be authorized. If you have a tenant violate HOA rules and you get fined by your HOA, you can't pass those on to the tenant. So basically, all you can now charge the tenant is rent, and the tenant can have an extended period to pay the rent, and if they don't pay it, you really don't have a lot of recourse other than a measly $20 fee or just to file eviction. So what can you do to help try to fight this bill? Well, here are the sponsors of the bill, and the first step is to try to reach out to them. Whether you're a Colorado resident or not, if you own rental property in Colorado, you have a vested interest in this state and the housing market, and you can contact these representatives, email them, call them, snail mail them. If you're local, you want to stop by their office, whatever it takes to let them know your opinion and how you think this is, in the long run, going to harm the housing market and just raise prices across the board for these same tenants that they're trying to help. Next, if you live here in Colorado, go ahead and contact the representatives for your district. Whether they oppose the bill or not, make sure they know your opinion and that you're strongly opposed to it and you think that they should vote no when this bill comes to the floor. Thanks for watching this video all the way through to the end. If you could do me a big favor, right down below here, there's that little thumbs up button. Just click on that for me. That helps other people find the video, and we're trying to bring as much exposure to this bill as we can. So that really helps us out. You can also share the video with anyone you think would be interested in learning more about this bill. If you want to get a copy of the bill and read through the whole thing start to finish because you find that kind of stuff interesting, you can go right here to that link. We've got it published there. Feel free to download it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being awesome. We'll see you next time.